Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Night Terrors. It's Russ. Before we listen to this new episode, I just want to take a couple of seconds to ask you to hang out after the episode is over. I've got a teaser announcement about an upcoming project that we have just started working on over at the Rangers Grove. So, if you are a fan of D&D and fantasy and you fancy yourself a bit of a writer, I think this is right up your alley. But let's not talk about that now. Let's turn things over to the Grove Master and let you enjoy today's episode. Please note, Night Terrors is for a mature audience only. Episodes may contain language, violent images, and extreme gore. Welcome back, dear listener. You know, sometimes the Grove Master does get tired of evil lurking in dark and dank places. For a change, let us celebrate beauty, light, and... What's that? Oh, no, don't worry. In this tale, beauty, art, and light go hand in hand with agony and death. So join me and celebrate the endless, the immortal talent of the Sculptress. Andy immersed herself in the murmuring hush of the huge gallery filled with art enthusiasts. They were all in a state of near-religious awe as they studied the sculptures, their eerie, lifelike stillness caught beneath the spotlights. Islands of lights in a vast space filled with shadow. Each piece bore the unmistakable touch of Monsieur Yves Mouret, a devotion to detail so intense that it blurred the line between artistry and creation. She had been following Mouret's work for years, captivated by the precision of his chisel, the way his sculpture seemed to capture not just form but soul, as if they might flex when no one was looking. But Andy wasn't just here for the art tonight. Nick was supposed to be meeting her. Supposed to. Andy checked her phone. No message. Typical. He was always late, always distracted, but then he'd flash that lopsided smile, say something disarming, and she would let it slide. She wasn't sure why she put up with it. A ripple of movement caught her eye. Yves Mouret himself had entered the room, a lean figure in a tailored black suit, his salt and pepper hair brushed back neatly. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd with quiet intensity. He was a rare sight, and she'd never spoken to him, only admired him from afar. Nick finally arrived, his voice cutting through the subdued murmur of the gallery patrons. "Hey, it's me! I've finally made it," he said, jogging up to her, slightly out of breath, sending a muted shockwave through the art enthusiasts. His hair was perfectly tousled, the collar of his shirt casually open. He gave her a quick kiss on her cheek. "Sorry, babe. I lost track of time." Andy rolled her eyes, but felt her irritation wane. Nick had that effect on people. Nevertheless, she knew him too well and couldn't resist staring into his eyes. He grinned, thinking she was admiring him. She only smiled back when she saw his pupils were properly dilated in the low light of the gallery. He was clean. Before she could chastise him properly, though, she noticed Yves Mouret watching them. More specifically, watching Nick. The sculptor approached, his expression thoughtful. "C'est bon. You have an interesting face," he said. His voice was smooth and measured. "Strong features, defined bone structure." He tilted his head slightly, as if seeing Nick from an angle no one else could. Nick grinned, pleased. Well, I do my best. Andy felt a strange flicker of unease. Murray's gaze lingered, as if already sculpting Nick in his mind. The artist reached out a wiry hand bearing an oversized ring of black onyx and gold to capture the angle of Nick's jaw. "Excuse me, Monsieur Murray. He's flattered, believe me, but we must admire your work." She placed a hand on Nick's arm and gently steered him away from Murray's unsettling gaze. "Come on, handsome," she said, forcing a smile. "Let's actually look at the art." Nick allowed himself to be led, but not before flashing a quick grin at Murray. "Guess I've got a face for marble, huh?" Murray didn't smile back. He only watched them leave. Andy exhaled, trying to shake off the odd tension, and guided Nick deeper into the exhibition. "He only ever works in white unblemished marble," she explained. The sculptures loomed around them, each figure carved from stone so precisely that arteries and veins seemed to run beneath the surface, frozen mid-pulse. A woman with her head tilted back in laughter, her lips parted as if a sound might escape. A man in repose, his fingers curled like he just set something down. Even the marble sheen of their eyes felt too real. Nick let out a low whistle. "Damn, these are intense." He stopped in front of a sculpture of a reclining woman, draped in a flowing stone fabric that clung to her figure. He leaned in, peering closely. "I mean, you gotta appreciate the craftsmanship, right? I mean, look at those." He gestured vaguely at her chest, smirking. "Dude's got an eye for detail, huh?" "Jesus, Nick." Andy couldn't stop the irritation cutting through. "Can you not?" "What?" He turned to her, grinning like a kid passing notes in class. "It's a compliment. Well, he made her really sexy." "She's not real," Andy snapped. "She's a work of art, not something for you to... She stopped herself, shaking her head. "God, do you always have to be like this?" Nick scoffed. "Like what? Appreciative? It's not my fault Maura made her look... Murray! His name is Murray!" "Ugh!" Andy cut him off before he could finish the sentence, then turned sharply and walked away. She suddenly felt like the sculptors were watching her. Behind her, Nick sighed and followed, stuffing his hands in his pockets. "Oh, come on, Andromeda," he said, putting on his wounded face. "Don't be like that." But she wasn't sure what that even meant anymore. As Andy and Nick's tense silence stretched between them, Eve Murray reappeared, gliding through the dim gallery like a shadow. "I must say," he said, his voice as smooth as polished stone, "it's rare to find someone with such a natural presence." His eyes flickered to Nick. "A face like yours deserves to be captured by an expert." Nick grinned, clearly enjoying the attention. "Hey, if you need a model, I could clear some time." Andy stiffened. "Nick!" Murray reached into his jacket and withdrew a sleek, ivory-colored envelope. His large ring of onyx and gold caught one of the spotlights and flashed as he held it out between two long fingers. "I have a private retreat on my island. It's where I work away from distractions. I seldom invite outsiders, but..." He trailed off, his gaze lingering on Nick. "You would be a fascinating subject." Nick took the envelope without hesitation. "An island? Sounds like an adventure." He glanced at Andy. "Babe, this could be fun." Andy felt a chill coil in her stomach. She hadn't trusted Murray from the moment he singled Nick out. There was something too focused about him, too intense. "No way," she said. "We don't even know this guy, and now you want to go to his private island?" Nick rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on. He's a world-class artist. It's not like he's some dodgy stranger in a van." Murray chuckled softly. "I assure you, My work requires isolation. That is all. Andy ignored him. Nick, seriously, you're really considering this? Nick sighed, exasperated. Andy, you overthink everything. This could be an opportunity, a cool experience, you know? Her voice rose. Or it could be just another of your terrible ideas. Nick's jaw tightened. Jesus, you can be such a killjoy. Andy's face burned, but she held his gaze. Murray, still impassive, took a step back. I will not pressure you. His eyes flicked to Nick. The invitation stands. You are welcome any time. And with that, he drifted away. The rain drummed lazily against the cafe window as Andy stared into the dregs of her coffee. Things had got out of hand after the exhibition. She and Nick had plenty of arguments, and it was not the worst, but it had been enough to call a break. She hadn't heard a word since. She told herself she didn't care, and it wasn't her problem. Andy also knew she was an excellent liar. The bell over the door jingled. She barely glanced up, until a man slid into the seat across from her. Andy frowned at the intrusion. He was dressed casually, wearing a well-fitted leather jacket over a dark button-up. But the first thing she noticed, unfortunately, were the sunglasses. Big, mirrored aviators. A little too flashy, a little too naff. Andy Bolton? His voice was deep, confident, with a trace of an accent. Depends. Who's asking? He reached into his jacket and flipped open a leather ID wallet. Percy Argos, private investigator. Andy's frown deepened. Right, because my life needed more intrigue. Percy grinned, and to her relief, removed the shades, folding them and tucking them into his pocket. His dark eyes studied her with quiet amusement. She realized, annoyingly, that he was quite good-looking. He seemed to notice her sizing him up and tilted his head slightly. Mind if I join you? You already did. His grin widened just a fraction. Fair enough. She crossed her arms. So, what does a private investigator want with me? Percy leaned in slightly. Eve Murray. Andy's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. I'm not writing a piece on him if that's what you're after. He shook his head. Not looking for a journalist. I'm looking for answers. He paused. I've been researching Murray for quite a while now. He fascinates a lot of people, but most don't ask the right questions. Andy arched an eyebrow. Like what? Like where some of his subjects disappear to. She hesitated. She broke off, her repressed concern for Nick surfacing. Percy slid a folder across the table. She hesitated and flipped it open. Newspaper clippings, financial records, photographs. You know about his foundation? Percy asked. Andy nodded. The one that helps the homeless? That's the official story. Percy's voice was low and even. Murray takes in people with nothing, no family, no one looking for them. Gives them therapy, physical rehab, job training. Many of them re-enter society, clean, successful. Andy sensed the change in the man. The humor was gone, and his eyes were sharp. And the others? Puff! Percy mimed a puff of smoke with his hands. They vanish. A heavy silence settled between them. Andy glanced at the photos again, forcing herself to stay logical. And you think he's involved? I think, Percy said. Murray likes to choose people who won't be missed. He held her gaze and was very deliberate in the way he spoke next. Where's your ex? Andy flinched. She could feel Percy watching her. I have no idea unless... She trailed off and swallowed nervously. Explain. Percy ran a hand through his dark hair before tapping a finger on one of the pages. Murray picks his subjects carefully. He looks for people on the fringes, Runaways, loners, addicts, people who don't have anyone to check in on them if they go missing. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact, but Andy could feel the weight of concern behind it. Andy swallowed. You think that's why he was interested in Nick? Percy nodded. Your ex has a record. Small-time stuff, but it paints a picture. Possession, rehab stays, a couple of bar fights. And his parents, estranged for 5, 6 years? Andy's stomach turned. Closer to 7. Exactly. Percy leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. No one's waiting for him. No one's tracking his movements. Andy looked away, jaw tightening. She knew Nick had struggled, but she'd never thought of him as disposable. She'd never realized how easy it would be for someone to just erase him. Percy's voice softened slightly. Look, I get it. You don't want to feel responsible for him, and maybe he's fine. Maybe he's on Murray's Island, sipping expensive wine, posing for statues, and living the dream. He paused. But if he's not? I know Murray's Island is in the Aegean, but that's no help. I need to know exactly where this island is, and then I need to go there. Andy met Percy's eyes, ignoring the way they lingered just a little too long on hers. She closed the folder with a quiet snap and swore under her breath. I can't believe I'm doing this. Okay, let's get the idiot back. She pulled out her phone and swiped to the right app. I used to have to use this to find Nick after he would shoot up, but never mind. She stopped, not wanting to share more about Nick's habit. Percy gave an understanding smile and looked at the pulsing dot on the screen. Good decision, Andy. Let's go get him. The heat lingered on Nick's skin as he climbed out of the pool. The isolation of Murray's Island was beginning to feel surreal. The sculptor had kept his distance, offering him little more than compliments such as, "You're so strong and yet so elegant," and "Good posture, good bones." The Frenchman's lips would curl in hungry satisfaction. Then he would give fleeting instructions to exercise and vague promises of what was to come. Nick wasn't sure what to make of it, but so what? The guy was obviously eccentric, and if that gave Nick a free holiday, who was he to complain? He took a towel from the butler and wiped his face with it. He spared a glance for the old gentleman. As always, he was in a black three-piece suit, despite the blazing sun, and had a perfectly arranged turquoise cravat. His eyes were as white as pearls, and yet he navigated the island with a calm surety. Meals, drinks, the man had a gift for being there whenever Nick needed him. Nick grinned as he watched one of the girls from the Foundation exercising in the gardens below. Murray's Island was a precipitous rock structured into 3 levels. Below him was the Foundation for Renewal and its members. A bit culty for Nick's tastes, and he was glad to be up here on the guest level. Above him was Murray's private villa. Down there in the Foundation, Murray collected human flotsam, the lost, the discarded. "Will Sir be inviting one of the young ladies to dine with him tonight?" the butler asked, as if knowing exactly where Nick was looking. Nick absent-mindedly ran a hand over the marble shoulder of a statue of a woman in a flowing gown, her expression forever frozen in contemplation of the swimming pool. She reminded him of the first Foundation girl he had seduced. Oh, if only Andy could see him now. "I'll let you know," he told the butler. "Very good, sir." He loved the way the man bowed and then floated away. As Nick walked back to the edge of the pool, Murray appeared from the shadows of the villa above, his silhouette framed against the bright daylight. Murray's eyes studied him intently as he dived in and swam a few more lengths, as if measuring every movement, every breath. The look was strange, almost clinical, and it made Nick uneasy. As Nick climbed back out of the pool, the water cascading down his chest and flanks, Murray's lips parted slightly. "You're ready now," Murray said, his voice a whisper that carried across the quiet space. Nick looked up at him and cocked an eyebrow. Ready for what? Murray didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his head toward the blind butler who had reappeared silently nearby. "Take him to the art room, please," Murray said, and headed back into the house. The butler nodded, his steps measured, and gestured for Nick to follow him up to the villa. "This way, sir." Nick loved being called sir. They climbed the steps and entered the art room from a door on the veranda. The doors swung open with a soft creak, revealing an enormous space. The room was vast. Light poured through large windows, their panes crystal clear, drenching half the room in sun. Immense drapes covered half the windows, casting the rest of the room into deep shadow. Nick stood at the threshold, dripping water onto the tiled floor. Sculptures, impossibly lifelike, stood arranged in studied poses, the soft shadows cast by their frozen forms lending the space an eerie stillness. Nick's eyes were drawn to two figures in the shadows. Murray, his usual confidence conspicuously absent, and a woman standing with her back to them both. The high collar of her gown fanned out stiffly, concealing her head, and one of her beautiful, delicate hands was wagging a finger. Murray cleared his throat, but the sound was weak, almost pitiful. He wrung his hands, taking a hesitant step toward her. "My lady, The woman exhaled sharply through her nose. It wasn't quite a sigh, more an expression of restrained impatience. "You have disappointed me, Murray." Her voice was soft, yet it carried through the vast chamber. Murray flinched. I only wish to serve yourself." The woman's fingers twitched slightly, as if resisting the urge to make a more violent gesture. "You have been careless, sloppy. You let your base urges interfere with my art and risk my solitude." Murray swallowed hard. His usually impeccable posture was failing him now. He looked smaller, his shoulders hunched as if trying to fold into himself. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I did everything for you. Sometimes I find them, sometimes they find me, and I shape them into perfection. And adorn this, maybe, for private sale, or to remain here." The woman finally moved, just a tilt of her head, but it was enough to send Murray stumbling back. "No," she murmured. "A Perseus for my private collection." Murray opened his mouth and made a strangled cry. "But you smashed them." Murray's breath came faster now, his chest rising and falling in panicked rhythm. The woman turned slightly, and Murray backed off further. "You are no artist, Murray," she said, her voice thick with quiet disdain. "You are a parasite, a pretender who takes without understanding the gift you have been given." Murray visibly trembled, his knees threatening to buckle. "No, please, I beg you. I can do better. Be silent!" And he was. The words seemed to seize him mid-breath. For a long, awful moment, Murray stood frozen, his mouth working soundlessly. Then, with an agonized shudder, he turned and fled, nearly tripping over his own feet in his desperation to escape the room. Nick, still dripping near the door, blinked. The woman sighed, as if exhausted by the exchange, lifting one hand to smooth the fabric of her gown. "You'll have to forgive Murray," she said at last, her voice lilting slightly with something like amusement. "He's a weak man." Nick shifted uneasily. The temperature of the room seemed to have dropped, or maybe it was just him. His instincts screamed at him to go, but he found himself rooted in place. The woman gestured him towards a low platform. "Come," she said, her tone softer now. "You are stronger than he is," she murmured appreciatively. Nick hesitated. His skin was still damp from the pool, cooling rapidly in the vast space. The woman hadn't even looked at him yet, but he could feel the weight of her attention. "Come," she repeated, and this time it wasn't a request. "You are beautiful," she purred. "You deserve to be immortalized in marble." Nick relaxed and shook off his discomfort. "Thanks." He could tell from her silhouette that there was a shapely figure beneath the gown. "From what I can see, you look pretty beautiful yourself. Perhaps we could have dinner later," Nick asked. If she was angry at Murray, then maybe he could replace him.
Perhaps."
The voice softened further, alluring, even teasing.
"I want to see your full glory. Remove your trunks."
Nick grinned and did as he was told, unabashed. He stepped onto the low platform, drawn as if caught in the pull of an unseen tide. He even let the blind butler position him to the instructions of the woman. Finally, the butler handed him a sword.
"You are an ancient hero of Greece, glorious in your masculinity,"
she told him, her voice thrilling him.
"Raise it as if challenging a monster."
The butler headed over to the drapes. She made Nick feel like a hero. This piece was going to be amazing. "How long do you need me to stand here?" he asked, tensing his muscles. "How long will it take?" The woman moved closer.
"Just the blink of an eye,"
she said. The butler dropped the drapes, and the full glory of the room was illuminated. Nick's heart thudded in his chest as the woman's golden eyes fixed on him. Terror caught in his throat. His mouth started to scream, but no sound came out. The world around him had gone still. Time slowed. His skin prickled, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The hairs on his arms tingled as if an electric current was coursing through him, but it wasn't just physical. It was deeper. It was like his very body was being pulled apart and his soul sucked out. His lips barely moved, and his vision began to blur, a strange numbness creeping through his limbs. The horror of it rushed over him, an endless, suffocating wave of dread. His mind screamed for him to move, to run, but he couldn't. He was paralyzed, his muscles frozen. Then, a searing, unbearable pain hit him. It was so sharp, so deep, that for a moment he couldn't breathe. It was as though every bone in his body was shattering, every nerve on fire. He felt his veins thicken, his blood slowing to a crawl, turning to something thick and foreign. His muscles tightened, skin pulling taut over the bones. The crushing agony made him want to scream, but his mouth was stiff and unresponsive. The pain was unbearable, twisting inside of him, a slow and agonizing process that left him no space for thoughts of survival. The world around him twisted and warped as his vision distorted. His skin hardened, turning to something cold and unforgiving, something that no longer felt like him. He was slipping into something unmoving, something eternal. His eyes, wide with terror, began to lose focus as they sank deeper into the stone. The last part of his humanity slipped away. The agony twisted his mind, his soul writhing in panic as she consumed it. And then, all at once, the pain ceased. The woman gave a sigh of satisfaction, and all that was left was the cold, unfeeling stillness of stone. The midday sun burned high above the cliffs, turning the sea into a mirror of shattered light. From the balcony, Murray could see the pale stone steps winding their way down to the quay, flanked by jagged rocks that jutted like broken teeth from the water. The boat was nearing, its white hull stark against the blue. He felt sick. She stood at the edge of the balcony, motionless, gazing out at the approaching vessel. Her high-collared gown was utterly still, untouched by the sea breeze. She had not spoken since summoning him here, and Murray could not bring himself to break the silence. When she finally did speak, her voice was soft. "Look." Her voice was smooth as marble and just as cold. She lifted a pale hand, pointing beyond the cliffs to the small, unfamiliar craft cutting a thin line across the water. "Your failure," she murmured. "You have disappointed me." Murray swallowed hard. His hands trembled, but he clasped them together, willing himself to stillness. He knew better than to speak. The boat drew closer.
"I gave you everything," she murmured. "I shaped you, lifted you from mediocrity, made you my instrument."
A pause. The air between them was too thin, too light, as though the world itself was bracing for what was to come.
"And yet," she continued, "you have failed me."
Murray clenched his jaw.
Did I say you could speak?"
His mouth snapped shut. His pulse pounded against his skull, thick with the weight of panic.
"Why Nicholas Baker? Why invite a man who might be traceable?" she went on. "You left loose ends."
She gestured towards the sea, toward the nearing boat.
"And now they are coming."
Murray inhaled sharply, forcing himself to take a step forward.
I can fix this."
She was silent.
"Mistress, please."
She did not move, did not turn. She was radiant in the harsh daylight, her skin like alabaster, lips faintly curved in something between amusement and disinterest.
"I do it quickly for them," she continued. "I consume their souls in a moment, a breath, a heartbeat, the shock still fresh in their minds as their essence unravels, and because of that, they are beautiful."
Her fingers drifted lightly across the stone balustrade. Murray felt his stomach twist.
"But you, Murray,"
she exhaled, almost a sigh.
"You are not beautiful. For you, it will be slow."
She turned and glared at him. Her eyes, her golden eyes, possessed him.
"Mercy, mistress!"
A deep, biting ache spread through his hands. His fingers stiffened, fusing together at the joints, their flesh hardening to smooth white stone. A crackling, spreading ache, as if his very bones were splintering into jagged crystals that tore at him from the inside. His skin grayed before his eyes, marbling over, veins darkening into delicate traceries of fault lines beneath the surface. His breath hitched, or tried to.
No, please!"
His wail trailed off as his lungs and ribs solidified. The pain was not a searing, burning agony. It was worse, a slow grinding of flesh consumed by hungry stone, his soul stretching and tearing. Amidst the agony crept a cold, suffocating immersion, wrapping around muscles, tightening over nerves, locking each limb into stillness. His knees buckled, but he did not fall. He could not fall. Now the pain slithered through him in slow, crawling waves. His throat clenched, locked halfway between a sob and a scream. His tongue, his lips, his teeth were gone, swallowed by the relentless weight of stone. But the worst was his eyes. Murray's world dimmed, his vision crystallizing, fracturing, light breaking into 1,000 frozen shards. He saw the woman step closer, the smooth, slithering movements above her brow refracted into infinity.
"Perfect,"
she whispered, and then she pushed him. Murray saw nothing as he toppled over the balcony's edge, but his lingering consciousness felt the rush of air. Then came a final explosive agony as he shattered on the rocks below. The afternoon sun burned high above Andy and Percy as their hired boat cut through the deep blue waters surrounding Murray's Island. From a distance, the island looked serene. Cypress trees swayed lazily in the breeze, their deep green a striking contrast against the pale limestone paths that twisted up the craggy cliffs that surrounded the shores like a natural fortress. Andy clutched the side of the boat as a wave slapped against the hull, sending a spray of salt water into the air. Percy, at the helm, glanced at her. "Nervous?" She shot him a look. "Not at all. Just wondering if I should have worn something less trespasser chic." He laughed as he guided them towards the only break in the cliffs, a narrow inlet with a small jetty. The moment the boat bumped against the dock, Andy spotted the figure waiting for them. An elderly man stood at the edge of the jetty, his posture unnaturally still. His suit was crisp and formal, in contrast to the rustic setting. His eyes were milky and unseeing. The man was blind. He inclined his head slightly at the sound of their boat, his face calm but unreadable. "I heard you approach," he said, his voice low and smooth. "It is rare to receive unexpected guests. May I ask your business?" Andy hesitated. What was the play here? Demand answers? Pretend they were here on a friendly visit? Andy exchanged a glance with Percy, but he stepped forward smoothly. "Miss Bolton and Mr. Vasilakis, we're hoping to speak with Monsieur Murray," he said. Andy shot Percy a look. Why the false name for him when he gave the old man her real name? Was he known to these people? The blind man inclined his head. There was a long pause. The butler tilted his head, as though considering something that could not be said aloud. "Ah, yes, Monsieur Murray has been indiscreet again. If my memory serves, Mr. Nicholas Baker was your, +1 at the recent exhibition, Miss Bolton." The standoff lingered, the tension in the air thickening. "Look, we just want to see Nick." The butler's smile widened slightly. "Good. Mr. Nicholas Baker and all your answers are waiting at the house. You've always been most complimentary of my mistress's work." He turned toward the villa, his posture graceful and unhurried. "Mistress?" Andy glanced at Percy, unsure of what they were walking into. He gave a slight nod. They'd come this far. "Yes, my mistress was delighted with your commentary about her last few pieces. Murray was just her agent." "And Nick has been staying in her house?" Andy felt a flash of jealousy. Fine, they had broken up again, but they always got back together. "Mr. Baker stayed in the guest house," the butler reassured her. "Mistress never touches. She just looks." Andy glanced at Percy again and muttered, "Creepy," under her breath. Percy barely responded. His jaw was set and his eyes were grim. She had felt drawn to him these past few days, but suddenly she felt a sudden inexplicable distance between them. The path wound upward, flanked by towering rock formations that loomed over them like silent sentinels. Sunlight dappled the steps, broken by shifting branches overhead. The butler led them upwards, his steps sure despite his lack of sight. They walked in silence, the only sounds being the rustle of the wind through the trees and the waves below. As they made their way through the maze of gardens and pathways, something white caught Andy's eye. It was a marble hand, pale against the darkened earth in the shadow of the towering rocks. She stopped to take a closer look. The others walked on, but she crouched down, brushing away the dirt. There, on one finger, was a thick, ornate ring. It was all stone, but she knew this ring. She had seen its onyx and gold glint under the gallery lights, and remembered how its heavy weight suited Murray's elegant hands, as he'd studied Nick's jawline. "Remarkable, this hand," she breathed. "Why has it been left lying here?" Percy turned. His eyes followed hers to the hand. His jaw tightened, and she saw the flicker of understanding. The butler stopped too. Though he was blind, his head tilted slightly as though he sensed her discovery. He exhaled, something like a faint amusement passing over his face. "Ah," he murmured, as if speaking to himself. "Such an artist, always willing to give himself completely to his work." Then the butler continued forward, unfazed. Something was wrong. Andy was certain on that now. She had no rational insight, but her instinct was screaming at her to jump back in that boat and go. "Are you all right?" Percy asked, casting her a sidelong glance. Andy said nothing at first. Then, after a beat, she muttered, "I'll be better once we get Nick and some answers." The villa was imposing, classical in style with grand columns and intricate stonework. The butler led them into a grand foyer where the floors were made of polished marble. The lofty ceilings were adorned with frescoes and the walls lined with sculptures. The statues watched her as she passed, silent, unblinking observers, their eyes hollow yet filled with an unsettling sense of presence. She glanced at Percy. She realized just how much trust she was putting in him. He glanced at her and winked. He was handsome and charming, just like Nick. But Nick had always been out for himself. What if she was making the same damn mistake again? The air in the mansion felt heavier. Andy could hear the faint sounds of her own breath, but the stillness around her made it feel unnatural. The butler paused in front of a large door at the end of the hall. "This is the art room," he said, his voice soft yet commanding. Without waiting for a response, he opened the door and stepped inside, gesturing for them to enter. Inside, the room was even grander than she had imagined. The walls were lined with sculptures. The air felt cool and sterile, as if the room had been untouched for years. The entire south wall was a huge iron framework of glazing that flooded half the room with light, with drapes covering the other half. Standing in the shadows was a woman with her back to them. She was as still as the statues around her, looking towards the sea, framed by the silhouette of her high collar gown. Her posture was regal, and her presence projected a quiet power that filled the room. She turned slightly toward them as they entered, her movements deliberate, calculated. The butler stepped forward, bowing his head slightly. "Miss Bolton and Mr. Vasilakis to see you, mistress," he said, his voice low. Andy didn't look at her. Andy's own eyes had fallen on something else entirely. One statue was standing on a raised platform in the center of the room, raising a sword dramatically, his mouth open in a silent scream. It was Nick. Andy's heart skipped a beat. She froze, her breath catching in her throat as she took in the sight of him. It was unmistakably Nick, down to every detail. The curve of his jaw, the angle of his body, the way his hair ruffled with artistic precision. His face, though slightly contorted in a look of surprise or terror, was perfect. Too perfect. She couldn't look away. As she moved closer, her eyes traced his limbs, his hands, and that's when she saw his needle marks. Tiny punctures along his arms, almost invisible at first, but as she leaned in closer, they became unmistakable. The veins were slightly raised, the tracks of the needle still evident in the fine, lifelike texture of his skin. Yes, Nick had been an addict, but why recreate such detail? Unless... Andy's stomach turned. It was too real. She reached out instinctively, her fingers trembling as they hovered just inches from his stone-like skin. She felt a cold pressure in her chest, a mix of awe and dread. The precision, the craftsmanship. It was impossible. Is this really him?" Andy whispered, her voice trembling despite herself. The butler moved past them towards the drapes. His voice was soft, almost reverent. "It is." Andy could not process his words. She couldn't process the horror of what she was seeing. It was a precise preservation, not sculptured, but captured. Andy's heart pounded in her chest. She had seen many of Murray's pieces, each impressive in their own right, but nothing could have prepared her for this. His eyes, though, were the worst part. They weren't blank, weren't the smooth, idealized features of a classic sculpture. They were full of shock, realization, horror. She was standing in front of a corpse, not a statue. As vast as the room was, it suddenly felt smaller, suffocating her. She wanted to turn away, to run, but her feet were rooted to the ground. her eyes locked on the grotesque beauty of a man she'd lived with, laughed with, and for all his flaws, loved. Andy stepped forward, fingers trembling as she reached out. "Don't." Percy's voice was low but firm, cutting through the thick silence. Andy's hand stopped inches from the statue's stone skin. A soft chuckle came from the far end of the room.
"So perceptive,"
the woman murmured. Secreted in the deep shadows cast by the heavy drapes, she exuded an unsettling presence, poised, motionless, commanding.
"You did not come all this way just to mourn,"
she continued, her voice smooth and rich.
"You came for the truth behind the art."
Andy swallowed, her pulse hammering. "What have you done to him?" The woman tilted her head.
"I made him perfect forever."
Andy's hands clenched into fists. "He wasn't yours to make into anything." She turned to Percy, expecting him to lunge, to step forward, and to do something. But he was just studying the woman carefully. His expression was unreadable behind his aviators. The butler shifted slightly, his gloved hands finding the cord of the drapes. The woman in the shadows gave a slow, indulgent nod.
"Show them."
She began to turn. The butler pulled. The heavy drapes dropped in a majestic rippling of cloth, spilling sunlight into the rest of the chamber. For a moment, Andy saw nothing but a brightness that was blinding, searing through the dim coolness of the room. Then her breath caught in her throat. In that instant, the woman seemed impossibly larger. Her shadow stretched long across the marble floor, shifting, coiling, alive. And then Andy saw them. Not hair, not anything human. Snakes. A writhing, living crown, their sleek bodies twisting, tongues flickering, framing a face of beauty and horror. Terrifying golden eyes pierced her soul with hooks of insatiable hunger. Andy choked on a gasp as something primal surged in her. Some ancient instinct screaming for her to look away, to run, to flee. But her muscles wouldn't move as her skin rippled with coarse energy. Time slowed. Her vision began to mist over and her bones ache. Finally, Percy moved. He had to be sure. "Father!" He shouted like a battle cry, and lightning flashed in his hand and became a sword. He sprinted forwards, blocking Andy's view of the monstrous sculptress. The sculptress just laughed and unleashed her golden gaze upon him. Then she gasped as she gazed into her reflection twice over, mirrored in his aviator sunglasses. Too late, she recognized him and raised both hands in terror, stumbling back. Percy leaped forwards and swung. The scything blade intended for her neck lopped off both hands at the wrist. She shrieked as vicious, poisonous ichor spurted from the stumps. Percy advanced remorselessly. "How many years?" he asked bitterly. "How many years have I wasted tracking you down?" The snakes in her hair hissed angrily, and she gave a snarl, like a wounded animal at bay.
"She would have grown old and died, unlike you."
She laughed, a hysterical blend of delight and agony.
"Turning her to stone was a gift in return for you killing my sister."
The butler swung a cane at Percy with uncanny accuracy, knocking his mirrored shades off. "Shit!" he swore. The sculptress hissed in triumph.
"And I don't need my hands to make my art."
Percy screwed his eyes shut and gasped. He thrust forwards. His blade pierced her through the torso. She gasped with pain as he followed through, stepping past her and ripping the blade free in a spatter of poisonous ichor. It burned his hand. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he grasped for her head, and his grip closed on several writhing snakes. He twisted and hacked down with the sword, severing the monster's neck in a single stroke. Ichor bubbled up like a gory fountain as her body swayed in place. Wherever the blood hit the stone, It cracked and hissed, becoming pitted and blackened. Then the sculptress slowly toppled backwards and hit the floor. The gush from her neck consumed the stone in a frenzy of boiling poison and steam. Percy dropped the sword and gasped at the pain in his hand. Then he caught a movement as the blind butler scurried for the door. Percy hurled the severed head at him. A spatter of blood hit the butler, burning through his immaculate suit a heartbeat before the head hit him. A dozen snakes, insane with hunger and their own impending death, bit down into his face again and again and again. The butler lost all dignity as he screamed and moaned. He clawed at the head, but the snakes fastened their jaws tight as they too died. Locked together, they slid down the glass window, the butler shuddering and jerking as his body burned inside. Silence filled the room. "Sorry," said Percy as he turned back to Andy. "What a waste. I've heard good butlers are a rare find." Andy shuddered. Her skin cooled, and the tension left her body. Her heart gave a determined beat, jolting her back to life, and mercifully the paralysis passed. You killed?" "Yes," Percy nodded grimly. He clasped her shoulder with his good hand and gave a tired smile of triumph. "Thank you. I've been hunting her for so very long." "But, Percy, I can't see," cried Andy. He looked at her eyes and groaned. 2 orbs of marble stared back at him. He swallowed and hugged her tight, feeling overwhelming guilt. "I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Trust me, after so many dead, after so many years, it was worth it." "But the last thing I saw, she had snakes for hair." Percy flinched as he saw tears moistening Andy's petrified eyes. "I've got you. I'll take you home," he promised. "She had snakes for hair," Andy sobbed. "I know," he said softly, his voice full of regret. "And I'm sorry I never told you who I really am, or what Percy was short for. But you wouldn't have believed me if I did." "Well, looks like Nick had quite the transformational experience. He did love himself, and now he'll be perfect forever. But poor Andy, it looks like she only has eyes for Nick. Don't worry, she can take Nick home and put him in the garden as a keepsake next to the gnomes and the bird bath. And if she ever wants to break up with Nick for good, she's going to need a hammer. That's all for tonight, folks. Sweet nightmares." Hey there, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. This episode of Night Terrors, The Sculptress, was written by Chris Tomkins. Chris also wrote a previous episode of Night Terrors called The 10th Plate, a story based on the same Japanese mythology that the Ring movies are also based on. He's also the author of the Blackstone series. I'll be sure to put his information in the show notes of the podcast. Okay, let's talk about the announcement. First, let me just go ahead and play the teaser for you.
Hear ye, O seekers of adventure. Imagine, if you will, the grand sprawl of a city unlike any other. Its towers rise like jagged peaks against the sky, shimmering with the glow of 1,000 lanterns that flicker and dance in the cool evening air. Banners of vivid color billow from high windows, heralding distant lands and foreign customs. Welcome to Tirandel. Behold the illustrious city where tales of grandeur are woven into the very streets. Nestled between wilderness, farmland, forest, and sea, Tyrendel stands as a confluence of cultures, a melting pot of races and classes, where light and shadow dance in harmony. On the surface, you will find a royal castle, a bustling marketplace, warm taverns, and friendly people. However, beneath the surface, you must be wary of the dark places where rogues and assassins roam free. You might even find a monster lurking around the corner. This grand city is an open book, awaiting your quill to fill its pages with tales of heroism, intrigue, and mystery. Lend your voice to the chorus of Tyrendel, and let your stories breathe life into its ever-evolving saga. Join us.
Okay, that is Tyrendel, and the project is called Tyrendel Tales. It is a writing project that we are hoping to involve as many fantasy writers that want to participate, where the authors kind of create and dictate what happens inside the city, and we will keep track of all the characters that are created so that they can all intertwine and work together as the tales grow and actually build the city. Is there a thieves' guild? Is there a tavern? Is there a wizard's tower? Well, of course there is, but they don't exist yet because nobody has written them. So if you feel passionate about the young wizard's apprentice that rises to power and eventually takes over the Guild of Sorcery, then that's your story to tell. And we will keep track of all the characters so that there is a record of them and they can be intertwined into other people's stories. This is a new project, and we are still working out all the details, but we would love to get you involved. The easiest way to do that is to join the Rangers Grove Discord server if you're not already on it. And this is an open-ended project. There is no deadline for when stories have to be done. We want this to continue to grow and expand at whatever pace the participants and the writers decide to choose. Ideally, I would like to use these stories on the podcast, and you might even get the chance to voice your own character. So come join us. And even if you're not a writer, but you just want to be involved somehow, maybe a story idea or working with one of the other authors, come on down. Hang out at the tavern. We'd love to get you involved. See you soon.